So good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Philip Lowe. I'm joined by two of my colleagues here. One is Lisa Nakian. So Lisa is our program manager here for MIT I-Corps, and I'm joined by Roman Lubinski, who is our executive director of the MIT I-Corps program. So we are really pleased to have you here this afternoon. We are going to be hearing from Steve Konsek, who is a program director at NSF, and I'll give a more formal introduction in a few minutes. But again, I wanted to give a minute or two to our executive director, Roman, to share a little bit about I-Corps for those that are new to I-Corps or not familiar with I-Corps, and then we'll proceed with the rest of the program.
Well, thanks, Philip. Good afternoon to everybody. Great to see you here. This is part of our speaker series that's hosted by the New England I-Corps node. We will have additional speakers regularly. Watch for the announcements. Today, as you all know, and Philip mentioned, we have an SBIR program director from the National Science Foundation to talk about the SBIR and Sttr programs there. Next Thursday, we'll have a session, with someone from NIH doing the same thing, and we expect to follow on with DoD and other. I think there are 11 government agencies that give out SBIRs. So they're all a little different. So I'm going to share my slides for just a moment. I'd like to thank and point out all the other I-Corps sites that are at schools in New England. They all offer the NSF I-Corps customer discovery training. And if you're a researcher considering a deep tech startup, the NSF I-Corps program can help you. And I think it can help you in your proposal process with the NSF or actually any other agency. Now, if your school is an I-Corps site, they may be offering a course that you can sign up for, so check with them. The New England I-Corps node at MIT also offers customer discovery training. So if you're from MIT or from a school that does not have a site program, or if you are at a site and your schedule doesn't work with the programs offered by the school, you are welcome to enroll in one of our regional short courses. They're all virtual nowadays. We'll be running our 3-week-long I-Corps Spark program twice a month, basically. One kicked off a couple nights ago, and it was full. And the next open courses start February 9th, February 23rd, and then March 4th, pretty much every other week. So for more info or to apply, just go to the website or email us. The links are shown there. That's the end of the infomercial part of the program. So about tonight, the reason we are asking these funders to come is because SBIR and Sttr awards are extremely important funding sources for deep tech startups. Even better, they're non-dilutive. So as I mentioned, I think 11 different government agencies give out these awards. Each is a little different. Today, you're going to hear from Steve Konsek about how the NSF approaches it. And in my opinion, I think NSF is one of the most flexible sources in terms of what kind of projects they fund and at what stage those projects get funded at. Steve's been a program director at SBIR at NSF for a long time. He's got a large portfolio of these awards, so he's also very familiar with the I-Corps program. So I'll turn the mic back over to Philip so he can introduce Steve and you can get the program underway.
Sure, thanks, Roman. So again, a couple quick things before we get started. Today's agenda is pretty open. So here's kind of how it's going to work. So for about half an hour, we're going to have Steve kind of talk about some fundamentals about the SBIR program. He has a few slides that he's going to share. Shortly thereafter, we're really going to have some time for some Q&A. So if you have any burning questions or any questions in general, feel free to put them in the Q&A section. I'll be monitoring that throughout the entire session. So if you have any questions, feel free to pop them into the Q&A and I'll moderate them and try to get to them as best as I could. In terms of other logistics, this program will be recorded and we will be sharing the recording of this shortly after the meeting. We will also be sharing the slides that are used in the deck. So we will share that towards the end of today's presentation, as well as in a follow-up email. So in case you missed it or joined a few minutes late or you have to attend, we will record this, but we will also send it at the end. So now that we got the logistics out of the way, I'll go ahead and formally introduce Steve. So I personally had the pleasure of knowing Steve for quite a number of years, as well as a couple of my team members. But Steve Konsek joined the National Science Foundation SBIR Sttr program in 2012. And he has served as both a program director for the SBIR Sttr program, as well as the Innovation I-Corps program, which many of you are familiar with. Prior to joining NSF, Steve was the Chief Technology Officer at Illumitex, a venture-backed company developing light-emitting diode chips, packages, and fixtures for general illumination. Prior to that, he previously served as Chief of Technical Staff at Glow, which is recognized as one of Europe's top LED startups. And prior to Glow, Steve was the Director of Device R&D at Nantero, a memory startup. Throughout his career, Steve has developed innovative game-changing technologies across a broad range of semiconductor applications. He holds numerous patents and publication in LEDs, memory, process integration, and nanoscale devices. Steve has a PhD in physics from the University of Washington and a BS in mathematics from Purdue University. So that's all to say that Steve is extremely well-versed, extremely well accomplished, and we're really, really happy to have him here on today's session. So without further ado, I will let you, Steve, share your screen and more formally kick off the program.
Okay, thank you so much, Philip and Lisa and Roman. I really appreciate the invitation to present, and thank you to all of you attending. Thank you for your interest in the NSF SBIR program. I wanted to give just a brief overview and go through a few slides introducing the SBIR program. I understand that you're going to have a whole series of SBIR program officers, and that's terrific because, as Roman said, the SBIR STTR programs are run by many federal agencies. And as you would expect, each agency, their SBIR program reflects the agency's mission. So let's talk about NSF. So for those of you that might not know, NSF is the lead federal agency supporting basic research in science and engineering education. So the over $8.5 billion that NSF puts into basic research, in order for society and the taxpayer to fully benefit, it's important in so many of the cases for those new breakthroughs to be considered for commercialization or put down the road, on the path towards eventual commercialization. So it's really supporting that kind of translation, and not only from the academic labs into startup companies and into industry, but it's also more broadly, it's supporting the deep technical innovations that are developed all across the country, regardless of whether it's on campus or in your garage or in your local accelerator or in your home office, as many of us are working nowadays. NSF is there to help potentially support your translation, to help you reduce the technical risk in what you're doing, to make your company attractive to private capital. That's really the mantra of everything that we do in the NSF specific SBIR program, lowering the technical risk of deep technology innovations to make your company attractive to private capital. And through that, we have a whole series of programs. SBIR is really the flagship program. We put over $200 million a year, primarily into new startup companies. But we have a whole host of other programs, including I-Corps, Partnerships for Innovation, Industry University Cooperative Research Centers, the Intern Program, the Grant Opportunity for academic liaisons with industry, the GOLI program. All of these are there to help support the general innovation ecosystem. So the people and policies and resources and institutions that help translate new breakthrough ideas into economic activity. And, you know, since all of you are connected through the I-Corps node, the New England I-Corps node, you know, and all of the other ecosystem partners in the Northeast, I think you all really have a good understanding of that innovation ecosystem. So let's talk a little bit then. As I mentioned, through the SBIR and STTR programs at NSF, we put over $200 million a year into small businesses, mainly to startup companies, mainly to very early startup companies. I'll talk a little bit about the profile in a second, but companies can receive, so you all could potentially receive up to about $1.75 million in non-dilutive capital through the NSF program. Again, to help you reduce the technical risk of your deep technology innovation being developed, and then making yourselves attractive to private capital. As Roman said, you know, we fund here a pie graph of all these different areas that we fund. And one thing to keep in mind about the NSF program, or sorry, actually all SBIR programs across the federal government, people tend to talk about what are the topic areas, what are the, you know, these different topic thrusts that you're funding. It's important to keep in mind at the NSF program, we don't care about topic areas. Our topic is deep technology. And whether that's a chemical innovation or whether that's a materials innovation or an AI innovation, you know, developing quantum chips, you're developing, if it is really a significant technical breakthrough, then you potentially could find a home in the NSF SBIR program. So as befits something funded by the National Science Foundation, it has to be that cutting edge technical innovation. But apart from that, you name it. The only exceptions to that are if what you're working on really only has applications to the Department of Defense. Well, you know, Department of Defense SBIR programs are closer to your customer, and that's probably more appropriate. Or if you're doing straight up drug trials of very specific indications, then you should probably talk to my friend Michael Weingarten next week from NIH. Apart from that, you know, we fund a lot of things in life science. We fund a lot of platform technologies and pharmaceuticals, you know, except for, again, the straight up military applications or straight up drug trials. Apart from that, you name it, we'll fund it. So our companies, the statistics here are a little bit dated. As it says here, you know, we talk about startups a lot, and the statistics on the top there really show that over 90% now of what we fund are really very, very early startup companies. Many, many dozens of companies every year literally start operations. They turn on the light, you know, in their very first lab. They get access to their first fume hood or something as a company based on our funding. And that's terrific. We love those kind of early stage companies because frankly, that's where we see that our money can make the most impact. Taking the company from, you know, the first steps out of the lab is some of the most impactful money that we can provide. So with that in mind, you know, the NSF SBIR program, we really try to gear things towards newcomers. If you're new to federal funding, that's fine. Over 90% of the companies we fund have never had SBIR Phase 2 awards from any agency. They're newcomers to government funding. We try to write our solicitation. We try to write the information on our website with newcomers in mind. Our reviewers are used to newcomers applying. So we always say that, you know, submitting a proposal to NSF is It's not a creative writing exercise. You don't need a grant writer necessarily. What you need is to do your homework with customer discovery, know who your potential customers are, know who your value proposition to those customers might be, have a clear idea of the technical developments to support that commercialization vision, and you can potentially be a fit. I've mentioned technology a lot. For the SBIR program, it's technology development in service of commercialization though. Everything we fund in the SBIR program needs to have a clear commercialization focus. And our portfolio has been quite successful. The last several years, our companies have raised well in excess of over $1 billion in follow-on funding, and also another $1 billion in M&A activity. And we really need you focused on leveraging our funding, making yourself attractive to private capital. So let's look at a few examples here. We have, in the upper left there, we have Ecovative Design, who comes from, I think, upstate New York, if I'm not mistaken. They're developing mushroom-based materials for packaging and now all kinds of applications. Ginkgo Bioworks, you see, is a company, of course, in Boston. We gave them some of their very early funding. Thousand Eyes in the upper right there, they were one of my portfolio companies, actually. They just had an acquisition by Cisco in March-ish of 2020 for close to $1 billion. So lots of really exciting companies that we've really had the privilege of funding along the way. So let's talk a little bit now about how the process works if you're potentially interested. And you'll have to excuse me if you hear around 4 o'clock, our dogs start getting a little bit hungry. So she might be chiming in. The glamours of working from home nowadays. So as in most of the programs across the federal government, the SBIR program is really split into different stages. You apply for phase 1 funding. Phase 1 is nominally to do some kind of a proof of concept for $256,000. With that, you will identify and hopefully tackle some specific technical risk for that first phase of funding. Phase 2 is really where the real money kicks in, and that is for $1 million of funding. And that is to develop something akin to a prototype. Again, don't get too concerned about what these terms, proof of concept versus prototype. It's for you to be, further de-risking the technical aspects, and then really, really making yourself connecting yourself to private capital. And we have the phase 2B program, which will partially match third-party capital that you raise. So if you do a seed round, if you do, a series A or an angel round, we'll partially match that $1 for every 2 that you raise, up to an additional $500K of NSF money. So this is where, phase 1 plus phase 2 plus phase 2B, this is where added up, you can get over $1.75 million in non-dilutive capital. So how you get started? We launched, I think it was in 2019, late-ish 2019, the project pitch process. The idea with the project pitch, and this is a requirement for the NSF program, it's a really short pitch that you'll submit through a web form, and I'll give you the link in a second. And the idea with this, or the philosophy behind this, is that if you approach NSF for funding, obviously the very best thing you can hear from us is, yes, we'll fund you. Where do we send the check? The second best thing you probably can hear from us is a really quick no. That if you're not a fit, if you're not even in the ballpark for the kinds of things that we might fund, we want to let you know quickly. We don't want you spending time submitting a proposal. So the project pitch is really there to do a very, very coarse assessment. It's not a replacement for the full merit review process, a very coarse assessment of, are you in the ballpark for the kinds of things we'd potentially fund? And if you are, it's the way to start a dialogue with the program officer in the right topic area. This project pitch it should take you about 20 minutes to fill out, and I'll give you the link in a second. But all we want to know is, first of all, who's the team? Who are you? Who's your team? What's the market opportunity that you're going after? What is the technical innovation that really underpins and informs and enables this whole project? And again, this is NSF. You have to have a clear technical innovation, as an undercurrent, enabling everything that you're doing. And then finally, what would you potentially want to spend the NSF funds on, the technical objectives? This is a really short, quick synopsis. The details are all on our website. And with that, you submit that, and within a few weeks, usually a little faster, sometimes a little slower at times, depending on how many proposals that we have in the hopper, we try to give you that quick feedback. If you are a potential fit, you're given an invitation to submit the full proposal. And if you're not a fit, we give you very clear reasons why. If you think, we were off the mark, you can resubmit. It's no problem. The rules are all there at seedfund.nsf.gov/apply. Seedfund.nsf.gov is the NSF SBIR website. So if you take away only one thing from this webinar, seedfund.nsf.gov, just go there and take a look at things. Click on Get Started or that Apply button in the upper right, and it'll walk you through the whole application process. So after you submit your pitch, as I said, if we think you're potentially a fit, I don't like the term here, it says good fit. We don't really assess whether you're a good fit or not. This is really, like I said, a pretty coarse, tool. But if at that point you're invited, you can submit a full proposal. And for that, we have a whole other set of webinars that are going to be on our website, seedfund.nsf.gov, to walk you through the proposal process and to answer any questions. My motivation here in this webinar is to kind of get you in the pipeline, hopefully get you submitting your project pitches and start that feedback process with a program officer at NSF if you think you might be interested. That's all I have. We were kidding at the beginning. I was chatting with Roman and Lisa and Philip that all of our pictures here are from Antarctica, and this is another one. So maybe it's the wilderness, you're all out there in the wilderness of entrepreneurship or something is the metaphor. Maybe they're just cool pictures. So with that, looking through, should we take some questions?
Yeah, let's do that. So we actually have 2 questions already in the Q&A. And just for, again, a friendly reminder for the folks on the call, for those that joined a few minutes after we started, we had a great presentation just now from Steve. We really allowed 30 minutes or so, the next 30 minutes for you to really ask your questions. I wanted to leave enough buffer time for that one-on-one interaction with the program director so you could ask your direct questions. So please pop them in the chat. This is your opportunity now to ask any questions, obviously within reason, and we'll try our best to answer them. So first question, so Steve, we had a question about different types of companies or ideas that you fund. So one person, James, asked, would you fund mental health innovation or services that help society, particularly with traumatized or stressed frontline workers? Does that fall within something that NSF would fund?
It potentially, as long as there is a clear technical innovation that underpins and enables. We have funded, we have a very, very active digital health portfolio, and we have funded different technologies in that area, mainly through the digital health, but also through AI, all depending on what that underlying technology is. So what I would say is submit a project pitch, get some quick feedback from the program officer, and take it from there.
Okay. So that segues perfectly into the next question about project pitch, which someone had a question. How do you decide if a pitch can be funded? I guess, go ahead.
Yeah, so actually we don't decide if a pitch is going to be funded. The main thing that we're looking at with the pitch process is there a potential for a significant technical innovation? So meaning, have you articulated clearly what your significant technical innovation is? And are there any other, red flags with eligibility? Apart from that, that's all we really look at with the project pitch. And, I'll tell you a secret. We get some people that get really excited when they get that invitation to submit a full proposal, and they say, well, NSF has requested that we submit a proposal. It's just, temper your enthusiasm a little bit. We're really just trying to give a, quick feedback. And also this is a way that you can start a dialogue then with the program officer if you have specific questions. So again, it's not a proposals that are submitted to NSF go through the full NSF merit review, just like all academic proposals. We get external reviewers that either meet on Zoom, to discuss proposals. We call those panels, or people that provide written comments to NSF reviewing your proposal and giving NSF recommendations. That merit review process determines funding recommendations. The pitch is just, are you in the ballpark? Perfect.
So a follow-on question, I guess, because I anticipated a lot of questions about project pitches. So one of the questions was, what is the rubric for evaluating the project pitch, and what is the weighting behind each of the 4 pillars of that project pitch? How much weight do you put beyond each of those 4 questions? I'm assuming the team formation, the technical innovation, etc.
Yeah, most of the project pitch is there to help you, is to help us give you feedback. And if we see things on the team, if we see some fuzziness in the market opportunity, we might say, hey, you really might think about doing I-Core. And basically, I'll tell you all a secret. You all should really consider doing I-Core before submitting a proposal to NSF. It is the single best way to help prepare a really quality proposal to NSF SBIR. But really, the main thing that we're looking at in the pitch is a very clear articulation of the technical, the significant, sometimes they call deep technology innovation that underpins, informs, and enables your whole project. So be sure to clearly articulate that, but don't worry too much. If a program officer, they can't quite make out what you're doing, typically they'll just say, hey, tell me more about, you didn't quite address that technical innovation, tell me more. It's not, we try not to make just immediate immediate no's if we think that there's something maybe that just isn't clearly articulated.
Okay. So I know you mentioned the national program, which is a great segue into the next question. And you may not be able to give concrete numbers, but a person did ask, what percentage of SBIR awardees have participated in the national teams program? Do you have any insight into that?
Oh, I don't know, actually. It varies, as you can expect, especially, now that we've had several thousand teams go through the national program. It is more and more, but also keep in mind the NSF SBIR program is open to anyone. You don't have to have an affiliation with the university, which you do have to have a connection to a university to apply for the national program. So it's never going to be, a straight match. But I think the proper way to think of it is like I said, the I-Core program is probably the single best preparation you can have. The whole program is structured around what is, lean startup for deep technology companies. And that is the perfect fit, in preparation for submitting to NSF SBIR.
Okay. And then I'm going to do the next series as more of a quick fire drill, maybe some quick responses just to get these questions kind of answered. So the first one is, does the technical innovation have to be patented before submission? So there was a lot of questions about patents.
Not necessarily. And
Okay.
we just want to see, if it's the kind of thing that you're going to need to patent, talk about what your strategy is. But you don't have to have the license done. It's good if you have at least, can put can talk about your plan for it, but especially in phase 1, so it's okay to be early.
Okay. Next fire drill question. Do you favor physical products as opposed to analytical tools? Is there a preference?
Sorry, analytical tools.
So I assume the person is there a preference towards physical products versus non-physical products?
Got it. Yeah, no, we fund a whole gamut. We have a very active IT portfolio, education technologies, AI, digital health is a lot of, software products. If it is a significant technical innovation, submit your pitch and we'll give you some feedback.
Okay. Another quick question. If you're invited to submit the full NSF SBIR proposal, can you change it to an STTR? Actually,
yeah,
that's a good question.
Yeah, and just so you know, the difference between SBIR and STTR is the percentage of work on the budget that is going to usually an academic research institution or a federally funded research center. You can outsource work in an SBIR, but you can outsource more of the work in an STTR. There's a whole thing on our website about the difference. And yes, an invitation is to SBIR, STTR, and you submit to whichever SBIR or STTR, whatever fits your project the best.
Okay. And then another person asked, can you advise when the 2021 solicitation will be released?
Yes, that's a great question. For those of you and I thank you, because that means that whoever submitted that is looking closely, and that's awesome. Thank you for that. We don't have an active solicitation. We've made some changes. The solicitation is expected out soon. And that's all I can say. And actually, I don't know any more than that. Soon could mean this afternoon. Soon can sometimes, at NSF, soon can sometimes mean another month or so. I don't know exactly. It could be, let's hope for like this afternoon, but I don't know. The one thing, you can submit your pitch if the solicitation just covers the proposal process. We're evaluating pitches now, we're inviting pitches now, and we'll take it from there. Sorry, I know people out there are waiting to submit your proposal, but soon, I hope.
Okay. Well, a similar thing that we just talked about in terms of speaking with the program director. So this one person asked, we're trying to decide between NSF and NIH for a proposal. And it's an innovation method to perform new medications / bioactive molecular discovery. It is not really a clinical trial, at least not yet. What would be more appropriate, NSF or NIH, or should we discuss with both? What happens if it kind of myriads the lines?
Yeah, so there's a couple different layers. One, in general, we do have some overlap with NIH, and projects could potentially be submitted to both. I would talk to the program officer that reviews your pitch about that. So, or maybe after you get an invitation to submit a full proposal, send a quick email to the program officer that invited your pitch and talk to them about that. One great way, especially if you're an early or a new startup company, I would encourage you just apply to NSF. We have a lot of companies that get their first funding from NSF, really try to figure out the exact right direction to go in. Sometimes people aren't going to be just going into, a life science kind of a direction with your underlying innovation, and you might pivot into something else. Pivoting dramatically is a little harder with an NIH award. I mean, they have these National Institutes of Health, but they have a great those are great programs at NIH too. One thing, just so you know, you can apply to both. You can't take funding from both to do the exact same work. But you can apply to both as long as you're honest and you're just open. You're saying, well, we have proposals pending for both. That's okay. And but you can't accept funding to do the exact same work from two agencies. That's bad.
Okay. A question more about international eligibility. So a company based in the US, but its sales will be in another country. For example, they're doing water treatment in developing countries. Is that eligible?
As long as you meet the eligibility requirements. The eligibility requirements for NSF SBIR are on sbir.gov. So sorry, our website is seedfund.nsf.gov. SBIR.gov is run by the Small Business Administration. They cover policy across all the SBIR programs, including the eligibility for our program. But if you are a US company, majority owned by US individuals, that's US citizens or green card holders, if you meet the eligibility requirements, we have many, many companies that are going after international markets. That's totally okay. That's excellent. It's as long as you're going to make some money, and the development is going to happen in the US, and that's all good.
Okay. So a few more questions. One question is, does the technical innovation have to be completely new, or can it be a novel application of an existing technology?
Yeah, it depends, really. Typically, if it's a new application of an existing technology, or sometimes we get companies that want to, tweak something and do to go after a new market opportunity, those tend to be less competitive. But these are pretty general terms. I mean, it really, if it's straight up just a new application, same underlying technology, probably not. But be really honest about it in the project pitch. Again, part of the project pitch isn't, we don't want you writing the project pitch just to win an invitation. We want to have a really honest dialogue so we can give you feedback on the potential fit for the program and how it might be received. And we'll give you feedback on that. So yeah, it's something to submit a project pitch and see what the response is.
Okay. And then another person asked, I guess they did their research, Steve, they said, are there still combined phase 1 and phase 2 programs? If so, is that a different timeline or process?
Yeah, at NSF, you have to apply for, it's a serial. You have to apply for phase 1. Then you have to, if you win or awarded a phase 1, then you have to, work for at least 6 months, and then you can apply for phase 2. We find the phase 1 a really important way for us to get to know you, get comfortable with the work you're doing, see you set and meet milestones, see you work through issues that always, there are always issues and always problems at new early stage startup companies. So we find that the phase 1 process is really important for us to make really good decisions in phase 2. Remember, at the end of the day, we're spending your tax dollars on brand new startup companies. That's a pretty risky thing. And, staging it into separate phase 1 and then phase 2 is a way that we can be very prudent, with your money.
Okay. And there's multiple questions here, but I think they can all be summed up and I'll group them together, is in terms of pivoting if you got a phase 1 and you're applying for a phase 2, how much wiggle room is there in terms of rebudgeting or, reworking? Because understandably, phase 1 could be pretty tricky.
Yeah, no, we understand. Everybody, all the program officers at NSF, we all have backgrounds, working on early stage R&D projects at startup companies. Some of us were investors. We understand things change direction. We allow our phase 1 companies to go through I-Corps. If any of you have been through I-Corps, kind of where you were at the beginning and then where you wound up, 6 weeks later after the National I-Corps program, and how different your outlook is. that is fantastic. The program officer will work with you, in most every situation to retask the technical work, to change the budget if the budget needs to change, to really make sure that we are perfectly aligned with the direction you need to go with your startup. That's really important. We want to see our money be the most impactful, and we want to see you get the most mileage out of this, really precious non-dilutive early stage funding. Okay.
So a more technical question, and I think comes back to specifics. So if they're thank you for a great presentation. If our startup has to officially be incorporated when we apply, if not, how can we determine if we are at least 50% of our company's equity must be owned by US citizens?
Yeah, so you do not have to have the company form to submit a pitch. If you want to submit a proposal to NSF, if you're invited and you're ready to submit a proposal, there are registrations that you need to go through. And those are all listed at seedfund.nsf.gov/apply. It walks you through the whole application, from start to finish. And then there are registrations. You need a Dun & Bradstreet number. You have to get on the system for award management. You have to register with NSF through the NSF Fastlane, the proposal submission system. Usually for an early stage company, I imagine your cap table isn't all that complicated. The expectation is that 51% of the company is owned, 51% fully diluted is owned by US citizens or permanent residents.
Okay, so that's a great question, follow-on question. Can you work with a non-US subcontractor, someone asked?
The NSF funding must be spent in the US. Sometimes, if there really is just like a unique piece of, not a piece of equipment, some unique materials and supplies that only come from one supplier in the world, and that is what you have to have, we can kind of work with you, but we're not gonna typically allow NSF funds to be spent working with international partners. The exception is 7% of the award is a small business profit or a fee that works out, about $16,000 in phase one. That's profit. You can do, what you want for that. But really, if that kind of work needs to get funded, you really should be raising private capital along with the SBIR funding. SBIR funding can't be used for patent costs. It really can't be used for business development. It really is just there for, except for a few carve-outs, for technical R&D work. You're going to need other money too. So start talking with investors as well.
Okay. So some really, actually one of my colleagues here has that question about ventures. So that segues very nicely. So my friend Yuli says, how does venture funds, how could that support the creation of pipeline by NSF? So I guess how does ventures work hand in hand with NSF?
Yeah, we really see ourselves filling a gap in the market, especially with deep technology companies, many of whom have, in some cases, these are very capital intensive industries. In other cases, it's just a lot of technical risk. There is a whole host of different funding mechanisms available. There are many very, very quality ones in the Northeast. We are one piece of that innovation ecosystem, but really we see ourselves trying to fill that early stage gap, allowing companies to de-risk their technology. And then when I say make yourself attractive to private capital, we really mean it. The SBIR funding wasn't created to displace private capital. That's not the reason why it's there. We want to see companies take advantage of it and really get the right profile so they can take advantage and really step into those private capital markets.
Okay. And this is more, I think, your sweet spot, Steve. And I think I'm curious on your answer as well. This one is a really good question. So Josh asks, I remember from other SBIR presentations, a really big emphasis on technical risk. So can you elaborate a little bit more on technical risk? How high of a technical risk is NSF looking for? Would it be appropriate to have a near goal and then a reach goal to put in the proposal? What do you define as technical risk?
Yeah, this is one of these things that, since we have such a broad swath of what is a technical risk in a chemical technology versus, energy versus AI and quantum, what we want to see though is that if we had a group of talented people and funded them for $256,000, is there a reasonable chance that this just plain out wouldn't work? That's a good way to kind of judge, is this risky or not? Is there technical risk there? Is there really some uncertainty that at the end of the day that this can be done? If you just need funding to do, oh, we just need some tests, some environmental testing of this thing that we already built. And, if it's just testing or evaluation of something, that's really not technical risk per se. So this is a completely probably unsatisfactory answer. The other thing I would say though is that submit a project pitch and get some feedback. And if we think that, there's something here, but it just seems kind of, disjointed or doesn't quite fit, we'll tell you and we'll ask you to revise it or try to tease out kind of, something more aligned along the lines of what we can better evaluate. So specifically to the question of having, near goals, having, stretch goals, yeah, that maybe is one way. As long as you know what that near goal and that stretch goal really mean or enable from a commercialization standpoint as well to motivate why those goals are meaningful. So.
Okay. And so there's two questions that I think we could, I'm happy to take a stab at it, Stephen, and I would love your input. But one of them was around I-Corps. They said a lot of the I-Corps teams now are really aimed at teams coming out of university labs, and how many are from non-university labs. I don't think there's a number per se, but I think the focus has really been increasingly on university labs is my answer. I don't know if you have any additional insight you wanted to share.
Yeah, I don't work on the I-Corps program any longer, so you'd have to attend one of the I-Corps webinars, and maybe ask that of the I-Corps program officers. The majority of teams that go through I-Corps are university teams. I-Corps is it was formed as an academic program to really, jumpstart and to really kind of turbocharge translation of technologies out of the university and into startup companies. But there are other flavors of I-Corps. We have now SBIR phase 1 companies that win SBIR phase 1 funding can go through the full I-Corps program. We actually give a little extra money on the SBIR award, we give them a supplement, and then we have a whole cohort of SBIR teams that will go together through I-Corps. So there are many options. And then, locally, you probably have community teams as well, don't you, Philip?
Yeah, we do. So I think that's a perfect segue back into an earlier point that Roman mentioned. So we run our Spark program open to anybody in the New England region, whether you're tied to an academic institution or a community team. At the minimum at Spark, our 3-week program, which I wanted to put a caveat, it's not 3 weeks total every single day, it's 3 weeks in total length-wise. That program that we run quite frequently on campus, we're happy to help you walk through this customer discovery process. Like Roman mentioned, we do have slots available in the upcoming Sparks. February 9th, we definitely have a few slots. So if you want to kind of explore customer discovery, we're happy to have you there. Non-academic teams, you may be eligible for the national program. That's, again, a question that you want to probably ask the NSF I-Corps program directors. But at the minimum, we're really happy to help you at the regional program. And I think if you just go on icorps.mit.edu website, you can find out details and how to sign up.
Philip,
go ahead.
Let me just chip in for a second there. We have had many people who have gone just through our MIT or regional I-Corps short course that have gone directly and applied for NSF SBIR proposal and received them. They did a lot of customer discovery work on their own. It might have been helpful to go through the national program as well, but it wasn't required. I think once you get tuned into the right track, the local program can help you quite a bit as well.
And I'm going to pile on. The instructors that Roman and Philip and Lisa and the team have, really good I-Corps instructors, and the local I-Corps programs are high quality programs. I would encourage you all to try to participate in these, and especially now that they're online, it really increases the reach of these programs. That's exciting to see.
So Steve, this is a fun question. So maybe it's specific to you, maybe it's specific to any program manager or director. So how do you actually work with the teams during phase one? How do you interact with the teams? What is that relationship like with a program manager during phase one?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's really one thing I'm going to give you a really honest answer. It's something that all of my colleagues and we really love working with startup companies. It is really one of the highlights of the job. And we try to make ourselves available to be there for especially some of the early companies that don't yet have a board, don't yet have solid advisory boards. We try to be there to be able to provide guidance as appropriate. We are federal employees, so there, some things that we can and can't, give guidance on. The flip side of that is we all have, I've got 130, 150 companies in my portfolio right now. And so as you can guess, with such a large portfolio, it's hard to make the time. Boy, we'd love to be talking all the time with our companies and to be more involved. So we're there as a resource. And I think you'll find my colleagues and I, maybe more my colleagues than me, they provide really good advice. So it is a resource there that we encourage our portfolio companies to take advantage of as appropriate.
Okay. There is a question about just project pitches in general or proposals. It says that only one proposal can be submitted per application window. So if a pitch is approved and valid for 1 year, but the team then intends to apply for a different project during that same application window, can they submit another pitch or?
No, technically, we did have a COVID-specific funding opportunity last year that relaxed those rules specifically for COVID-19 specific proposals. Right now, you submit one at a time. And in fact, while you have a proposal pending, you're technically not allowed to submit a new pitch. So you're never going to have more than one proposal pending in our system at a time. And to tell you the truth, that's for your own benefit. Back when I started, we allowed more, and we would have companies applying, 2, 3 proposals simultaneously. And I tell you, when reviewers see 2 or 3 projects from the same company applying, typically the message you're giving is, you don't know really what to focus on, and you're throwing the spaghetti against the wall and seeing which proposal sticks. And that's not the best look. And it's also not the best strategy for your startup. You apply with the #1 thing that you think you need to work on and is the best market opportunity.
Okay. And then, so speaking on applying for that one project, someone said they couldn't find their research area in the topics on SBIR.gov. Is there any chance to apply his proposal for if his topic is not aligned with one of the topical areas?
Typically, your project pitch will specify a topic area. And if you have any questions on that, send a quick note to the program officer that invited your project pitch, but they will invite you in a certain topic area. And to tell you the truth, it doesn't matter. You can pick some other topic and it'll still, I shouldn't tell you that because it creates a lot of work for our staff. So don't do that. But just submit to the one that you got the invitation from. If for some reason we swap topic areas, we change them. If for some reason that topic area disappeared, just send an email and we'll be able to guide you on that.
Okay. Someone had a question about STTRs. Does the sub-research institution have to be doing active R&D? Could they take tasks with lower technical risk while the startup does higher technical risk? For example, MIT Innovation Initiative has partnered with a number of startups applying to AFWorks times SBIR. And MIT Innovation Initiative is a sub on the STTR and performs several tasks.
Huh. Yeah, maybe. Talk to the program officer about it. Maybe, as long as the work, the subaward institution needs to be doing technical R&D work. Sometimes that technical R&D work is not the heart of the matter or really the key technical risks, but it's more, testing or, fabrication or, equipment, that kind of thing. So maybe, I'll tell you, you will be evaluated on the project you submit, but if after a panel review, if you're shortlisted for consideration for award, the program officer will reach out and you'll have quite a lot of follow-up and dialogue with the program officer. And, if they think the subaward is not quite, that's not quite a subaward, those kinds of things you're not going to get your proposal declined for. The program officer will work with you to make sure your budget is fully compliant at that point. So, so just put down what you think is a reasonable program and a reasonable, what you propose to do, and we'll take it from there.
Okay. And this is a twofer question, and we're wrapping up towards the end of the Q&A session. So the first question is, does the age of the business factor into decision-making, or do they need to start a new business if they intend to pursue NSF SBIR?
I wouldn't necessarily need to create a new one to apply. We do look at the track record of the company. So if your company has been around for, 10 years, and explain what it's been doing, explain what the other activity is. If it is totally unconnected work, it's your consulting business and, it just exists and you want to apply it to your consulting business, you might want to think about, if this is a new startup company, maybe starting it off fresh might be a good idea, especially if you want to bring in investors or something. And, but really there are no hard requirements. We do expect a clear discussion of the history of the company and what you've been doing. Certainly if you've won other SBIR Phase 2 awards, you're required to give a commercialization outcomes, because we want to know the track record with those prior awards.
Okay. And then in terms of moving forward, do you have any statistics, and you may not, Steve, so that's perfectly okay, on how many awardees moved from Phase 1 to Phase 2, say in the last couple of years? Yeah,
so the typical funding rates-ish, and again, it's usually 10 to 20% in Phase 1. And it depends on how many proposals we get. It depends on our budget. It depends on a lot of things. It depends on the quality of the submissions from cycle to cycle. Phase 2 is typically around 40%-ish. So Phase 1 companies that go on to Phase 2, it's about 40%. So significantly higher. But again, those are all funded companies that you're, in competition with at that stage. So we're going to expect a lot of progress in Phase 1, both on the technical side, but also on the business side.
Okay. And then the last question that we have, and cognizant of your time as well, how could open source based biology development square with the commercialization requirements? So I guess the general question on open sources versus how that plays into commercialization.
I'm a physicist. I have no idea what open source biology even means. Wow, this is a great question to end the session, Philip. You're really putting me in a really great light here. So submit a project pitch and talk to the program officer that runs our, Eric Pierstorff is he runs biological technologies. Eric's awesome. And that's a really good question for Eric.
Okay. Well, with that, I'll give it, thank you, Steve, so much for your time. Wanted to be, again, cognizant of your time and appreciative. Just as a closing thing, I believe Lisa is going to put the PDF of Steve's slides here in the chat, and so stick around for that. We will also send an email, follow-up email with a recording of this webinar as well as Steve's slides. We really appreciate your time, Steve. I'll give it to Roman if he has any last-minute words to say. Roman, I think you're on mute.
Sorry, double muted here. Thank you, Steve. That was great. And Philip, nice, quick job on fielding questions and moderating them. I think one thing I would point out is I think that if you're not at a university and you think there's a good chance that your project is can qualify for an SBIR award, whether it's NSF or elsewhere. I think check out our regional program, and you may be able to get customer discovery training through us. Other than that, I think it's a great. Thank you for attending. Great questions.
Thank you so much. So I heard, as a quick update, we will be sending out the slides. So please don't check the chat here. It is disabled. So we will be sending the slides this evening or tomorrow. So again, thank you, everyone. Please stay tuned for all of our other upcoming events. We will have a SBIR discussion next week, again, really focused on NIH. So if that's more aligned where you're thinking, we will hear from one of Steve's colleagues next week, talk about the NIH SBIR program. With that, I hope everyone stays safe, and thank you so much for joining us today. Take care.